Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. If it's not evening where you are, good afternoon, good morning, whatever it may be. My name is Jasmine Hawamde. I'm moderating today's panel. Today's event is titled Naji Al Ali, 35 Years On from an Eternal Legacy. This event will be commemorating the 35th anniversary of the assassination of Palestinian refugee artist Naji Al Ali. Before introducing our speakers, I want to let you folks know that if you have any questions, please keep them until the very, very end for us to have a dynamic Q&A session at the end. And after all 5 speakers have been provided the opportunity to speak about their work and their experiences, etc. And so without further ado, I'll be introducing our phenomenal panel for today. Starting with Slimane Mansour, is one of the most distinguished and renowned artists in Palestine. His style embodies steadfastness in the face of relentless military occupation. His work, which comes to symbolize the Palestinian national identity, has inspired generations of Palestinians and international artists and activists alike. Born in 1947, Mansour spent his childhood around verdant hills and fields of Birzeit, where he was born, and later his adolescence in Bethlehem and Jerusalem. These experiences left a significant mark on his work, heightening a sense of gradual loss in Palestine, especially after the occupation of the West Bank and Jerusalem in 1967. His early experiences also presented him with the symbols and images he would later use to preserve and highlight Palestinian identity. By using symbols derived from Palestinian life, culture, history, and tradition, Mansour uniquely illustrates Palestinians' resolve and connection with their land. His pieces epitomize art as a form of resistance. With orange trees, he represents land loss in the Nakba of 1948. With olive trees, he represents land occupation in 1967. With women wearing traditional embroidered dresses, he represents Palestinian land and Palestinian revolution. With the landscape of Palestine and its stone terraces, he represents the mark of Palestinian farmers on the land, with images of Jerusalem and the glistening Dome of the Rock. He represents Palestinian homeland and a dream of return. Mansour, together with artists Vera Tamari, Taysir Barakat, and Nabil Anani, founded the New Visions movement in 1987. The movement was formed in response to the first Intifada and called on artists to boycott Israeli art supplies and instead utilize local natural materials such as coffee, henna, and clay. Mud, the basis for human life in many cultures and religions, as well as an actual piece of Palestinian land, was a tool of choice for Mansour. Mansour, I am giving you the floor. Thank you so much for being here. I know we are all such fans of your work, and you're truly a legend and a revolutionary artist. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Jasmine. I will try to speak in English. I thought it will be in Arabic.
If there's anything you want to say in Arabic, please feel free, and I'll do my best to translate. But it's not the best either.
I met most of the artists who were working at the time of Naji Al Ali in the 70s and 80s. I know most of them, but for my bad luck, I didn't meet Naji. When I was going to Beirut, he was in Kuwait. But anyway, I thought I need to ask about him from his friends. So a friend of his, he is an artist living now in Canada, Abdul Hadi Shala. He told me a story that it gave me answers for many questions. Naji used to say that he was born as a caricaturist, but anyway, and being born as a cartoonist is not enough to make you a legend, as he is. there must be something else. Yani there must be some power behind him that made him so much important. And this story will give you an idea about what kind of yani what kind of power he had. In 1985, he made an exhibition in Kuwait, and Abdul Hadi was there, and many people came. And in the middle of the exhibition, an old man came with the kufiya and the agal and kumbaz, the traditional Palestinian dress. And Naji left everybody and went to that man, and he hugged him. And Abdul Hadi asked Naji, who's this? Is this your father? Naji said, come on, man. Every Palestinian is my family. Every Palestinian is my father, is my brother. So this sense of belonging, I think it was the power behind Naji. This sense of belonging made him consider a Nakba and the immigration as a personal issue for himself. And he did that in Hamdallah. Hamdallah, he's the young guy, the 10-year-old boy. It's him. And he's the revolutionary who rejects any solution that cannot give the Palestinians all their rights. So and for his love for the Palestinian people and Palestinian culture made him feel that all this Nakba is his personal problem. And in art history, we know that if you think too much about a problem in art, it will come to you as a wahi. I don't know what wahi means in English. And looking at his work, I think in every cartoon there is a spirit of this wahi, and in his cartoons, and this is what made him this kind of legend. Of course, he met many people in the newspapers, many intellectuals, writers, and of course, talking to them made his experience in cartoon made it more deep and more strong. Murid al-Barghouti is a famous poet, Palestinian poet. Then he said that I used to speak with Naji the whole night, and then I leave him to paint. In the morning, I'm amazed with what he'd do. His power to edit everything into small lines that any political person, he can do that. Naji did that. Also, his sense of belonging made him refuse any. He didn't join any political group, and he made he made, as George Habash said about him, that he is himself. He's a Palestinian group that is revolutionary and very effective. And he described Naji as a group, as a political Palestinian group. Also, his being alone made it easy for many people to يتنمروا عليه, to bully him and to threaten him, and at the end to kill him. I'm sure he refused a lot of offers, as I know how things are going in the Gulf area. I'm sure he refused many offers with millions of dollars to work with this side or that side. So I think his sense of belonging, that was the power that made him a legend, made Naji a legend. And I always, when I teach art, I tell my students, you should try to get the sense of belonging. If you don't like Palestine, if you don't like Palestinian culture, then you will not do anything that is substantial in art. And Naji, as I said, he considered all this his own. He even considers considered the defeats of the Palestinian people, his own defeat. And that's why all his cartoons were so strong and so moving. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Seaman. I am so inspired, and frankly, those stories are so personal. I don't think we could hear them anywhere else but from you, from a legend yourself, because you are a legend yourself. Thank you so much for sharing those stories, and I definitely took away a lot from that, especially about the power of art and being a party on your own, and the impact that Naji had. So thank you for sharing, and we're going to come back to you for the Q&A, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions for you. Next, we have Dalia El-Sharbini. She is a Palestinian-Canadian contemporary artist based in the great city of Toronto. Her body of work is inspired by her fascination with the laws of nature, her culture, poetry, and philosophies she lives by, like Taoism, a Chinese philosophy that advocates for living a life directed by your heart, to be in close alignment with your intuition and the flow of nature without allowing external factors to disrupt the sacred flow. Dalia, you know how much a fan I am of you. I have the honor of also knowing you and having met you in person and being your friend. So thank you for being on this panel today. And I'm so excited to hear about your work and your thoughts on today's topic.
Thank you so much, Yasmin. I'm humbled and I'm honored to be part of this panel of incredible artists, including Sulaiman Mansour, who I'm honestly a little starstruck. I'm gonna try to keep it together. But the way Naji Al Ali, where do I start? The way I am inspired by him, to me, he simply represents the unshakable truth and the courage to speak the truth. And the very fact that he was targeted and eventually assassinated speaks to the power of art in having the power art has in infiltrating society and influencing the public opinion, to the extent that an artist with his tools and his little sketchbook and pen could be deemed a threat. And to add to what Mr. Mansour said about the power behind Naji's work and in connection to the sense of belonging, I think he resonated a lot with the mass Arab world at the time, because there was a formula to him. He's definitely like a singular exceptional case, هو حالة خاصة بالMiddle East and in the history of Palestinian art, because this formula, I think, consists of three things. And one is, first, he was an exceptional political thinker. Two, he was a talented cartoonist, obviously. And three, and most importantly, he was not affiliated with any political party. So this is the formula that made his work resonate with a lot of people and deemed the unfiltered voice of Palestinians. And on a personal level and on my own art journey as a Palestinian, I relate to him through continuing to use art as a tool to educate and tell the truth, and tell the truth about our homeland while living in diaspora, which is basically what he was going through as well. And I read somewhere that Hamdallah to him was like, you know how we have little pins and jewels and things to remind us of home? Hamdallah to him was like this little reminder that he kept with him in his art wherever he was, whether it was Kuwait where he migrated, or London where he left to work. He always had Hamdallah to remind him of his, like, the ultimate mission, which was very much intertwined with the quest for Palestinian liberation. So yeah. And there was one more thing I wanted to mention. I actually recently just featured Hamdallah in one of my latest pieces that I have at the back, and it's called it's a painting called The Guardians, and basically it's my way of honoring and continuing his legacy. And basically it's a painting of like two tigers that have stripes made of kufiyas, instead of, like, your regular tiger stripes. And basically, the two tigers represent Palestinian resistance and the rage that grew over the decades of occupation. And then I have little Hamdallah hidden here. It's like a little optical illusion. You can only see him under certain lights, but he's overlooking the scene of the tigers. And what's unfortunate is that Hamdallah's symbolism still holds true today. And with his back still turned to the world with despair and disappointment, he still awaits international law and the Arab leadership to wake up and take him home. So having him in a painting today still resonates, and it still makes sense, and it's time appropriate. Lastly, I would just want to mention a little detail that I read as I was researching and reading on Naji, and listening to his son speak about him. So there's a response that he gave to, like, a commentator that mentioned something to do with, he was just asking, the commentator was saying, like, don't you think that Hamdallah is against nature and he's not a normal kid? Like, his existence is against nature because he does not grow more than 10 years. And that's because Naji Al Ali left Palestine at 10 years old, and to him, time stopped at 10 years. And he will only resume his youth and his adult life when he goes back to his home. So it will, once we liberate Palestine, to him, this is where when time continues to the clock will keep on ticking after that. And so the commentator was saying that this is against nature. Seems like it's against nature. And his answer, Naji's answer, was, yes, he is against nature, and so is occupation. And that just stuck with me, and I just thought it was such a powerful answer. And yeah, thank you so much, Yasmin, and thank you guys for having me.
Thank you so much. I especially appreciate what you mentioned about the formula and that story and quote at the end. Oof, my heart, it was a punch in the gut, because as a woman who's only ever lived in the diaspora, I have to return. We have to return. So how did I grow? How did us children of the diaspora, how did we grow as Palestinians? And we're all, alhamdulillah, unfortunately, and unfortunately, yes, his symbol still hits too close to home. And I appreciate everything. And I'm very excited to see that painting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Amazing. Next, we have Carlos Latouf, who is a Brazilian political cartoonist. We have a cartoonist amongst the group today. It's very fitting for today's conversation. His artwork deals with themes such as anti-Western sentiment, anti-capitalism, and opposition to U.S. military intervention. He is best known for his images depicting the Palestinian struggle and the Arab Spring. Thank you so much for being here today, and I'm so excited to hear so much about your work and to contribute to today's conversation.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this event, to have the opportunity to speak to an audience, and especially to be among so distinguished guests. And of course, to speak about Naji Al Ali is always relevant, because Naji Al Ali has been an inspiration not only for the cartoonists, the men, but also the women. We see many women, Palestinians and not Palestinians, using art as a weapon to struggle for Palestinian rights. The most curious thing is Naji Al Ali was not my first inspiration, because before to know about his existence, his work, um, I've been, involved in making cartoons about Palestine. And exactly because I started to make cartoons about Palestine, I was introduced to the work of Naji Al Ali. And I saw many, many similarities because, even not being a Palestinian myself, I think the enemies portrayed by Naji Al Ali on his cartoons are also general enemies, common enemies, because Naji Al Ali is always speaking about colonialism, militarism, capitalism, the war. So we can say the enemies of Palestinians are the enemies of the humankind, of Brazilians, of people in Africa and Asia. So that's why Naji Al Ali is also universal, because he is speaking about Palestine from his own experience as a Palestinian living in a diaspora, but also his topics can be also used to portray all other aspects of colonialism and militarism, etc. So that's why his work is so important, because usually when we speak about Palestinian resistance, the image that comes to our minds are armed militants. Of course, this is part of the resistance, because the resistance against colonization, occupation, apartheid is also an unarmed resistance. But not only. We must to remind people, and Naji Al Ali is always reminding us, that the resistance can be achieved by other means. You can use the poetry, you can use the cinema, the music, the cartoons, the embroidery, many other artistic expressions, in order to represent the struggle for human rights, the struggle for sovereignty. So sometimes people tend to compare my cartoons to Naji Al Ali. Of course, it's a great honor to be compared to Naji Al Ali, but it's not fair, because Naji Al Ali was Palestinian. Naji Al Ali was killed for his belief, for his struggle, artistic struggle. And of course, Naji Al Ali is a symbol. The same way you have, as I say, the armed militia, the armed fighter as a symbol. You also have Naji Al Ali and his cartoon, his pen, and again, he's always inspiring not only men but also women. And it's another aspect of the resistance in Palestine, because, as I say, people used to have in mind men when we speak about resistance. But we cannot forget about the role of the women. And that's why I created a character called Mother Palestine, inspired by a refugee, Palestinian elderly refugee in Jordan, in a refugee camp in Jordan. So perhaps in my career, two things were too complicated to draw about. It brought me a lot of problems. It requires a lot of courage to speak about, to draw about. the police brutality in Brazil and the Palestinians, because I got many traps, I got many problems. I was arrested in Brazil for making cartoons about police brutality. It's a taboo. And the same way we can say to draw about Palestine is also a taboo, because you are always suffering all kinds of repression, censorship, allegations of anti-Semitism, allegations of pro-terrorism support, etc. So, as a political cartoonist, the one who intends to be a cartoonist is free for making cartoons about anything, unless, of course, if you are Turkish and you live in Turkey, because you can be arrested for making cartoons about Erdogan, or in Egypt you can be arrested for making cartoons about Al-Sisi. But usually, a political cartoonist drawing about Russia or Ukraine or United States or NATO, more or less, won't find any big trouble. But when you decide to draw about Palestine, expect some big trouble. And I think it's very good, because it means your work is working for sure, is hitting hard the ones who need to be hit. And I think this is the legacy of Naji Al Ali, the courage. Unfortunately, he paid with his life for using his art as a weapon of resistance. But as I say, it's necessary to have courage. It's required to be courage. That's why I think the courage of Naji Al Ali is always with us, is always inspiring us. From time to time, when I have sent attack for my cartoons about Palestine, I remember about Naji Al Ali. It's like his spirit, his strength is always following us, is always with us in this path for supporting Palestinian human rights, Palestinian sovereignty. And I'm so glad to be here to have this opportunity to remember Naji Al Ali and his legacy. And inshallah, we may have more cartoonists like Naji Al Ali, men and women, to keep his legacy alive. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Carlos. And thank you. I think you spoke to the solidarity, the importance of solidarity across movements, the importance of understanding the intersectionalities of our struggles and depicting that really, and the bravery that comes with being an artist across the world. So thank you so much for joining us. And I'm sure you'll have a lot more to say in the Q&A. So I'm looking forward to tapping into your brain a little bit more and picking it and hearing more of your thoughts. Next, we have Hadil Al-Safadi, who's a Palestinian artist from Safad. Born and raised in the diaspora, Hadil uses her art as a tool to advocate for human rights and social justice of many causes, particularly the Palestinian cause. From a young age, she started drawing using traditional mediums, but now works digitally. Her vibrant digital drawings pay homage to a homeland that she has never visited. Inshallah, you will. Her dedication towards the cause stems from a desire to reclaim the narrative about Palestine and deliver the truth about apartheid. She considers herself a storyteller with a duty to raise awareness about the realities of the Palestinian experience, culture, and heritage. Hadid, the virtual floor is yours. I'm very much looking forward to hearing about you and about your work.
Thank you so much, Yasmin. Thank you so much for this opportunity and for bringing us all together here today and to commemorate the assassination of the great cartoonist Naji Al Ali. As we were growing up, you know, I don't think there is a Palestinian house that doesn't have a piece of Hamdallah in the house, you know, as a keychain, a piece on the wall, just a painting somewhere. You know, and as kids, you know, our mothers, they used to tell us stories about what Hamdallah represented and the man behind him, who drew him and what is the idea behind it. But you know, as kids, you don't really grasp the idea or the concept that how important Hamdallah is until you start slowly grow up and realize that how brave Naji Al Ali was for actually creating this legacy and leaving it behind for us, you know. And Naji Al Ali for us, he was more than a cartoonist, you know. He was a brave man who didn't settle. He had his morals that didn't fold, even though at that time many cartoonists didn't dare to criticize Arab regimes, any other regimes, even the Palestinian Authority regime. But he was fearless, you know, and he didn't care about that. He just wanted to spread the truth. And as Mr. Latouf said, that he showed us that there's actually we can actually resist not on the battlefield but on other ways, especially like in our art. And intellectual resistance is also is just as important. And even though he knew all along like what the end of this resistance, what the end of his work is gonna be, he still continued to do it. You know, there was no compromise, and he just did it. Even he said that if you draw for Palestine, consider yourself dead. If you write about Palestine, if you do anything about Palestine, you're dead. But either way, he did it. You know, because he was so brave that he was still in connection with that 10-year-old that left the village and who was exiled from the village. You know, he was still as a grown man in connection with him and still waiting until his death for him to come back to that village. And he left us this legacy so that, you know, to give us hope and to give us he handed it to us so that we continue after him, and inshallah in the hopes of being free. And what I wanted to say that for me, why is he such an inspiration? Because he wasn't actually he wasn't the kind of person or the kind of artist that would talk about how great his artwork was or give lectures about it, or you know, basically his art spoke for itself. And it was more than just an art, it went way beyond that. You know, it was about the idea of bravery, of never compromising anything, even though his peers or people at that generation, they settled for the peace solution and the two-state solution, but he never settled for that, and he never accepted it. And it was always present in his drawings that uh, that this is not acceptable at all. And basically, lastly, I just want to say how he just presented Palestinians everywhere unapologetically, and he was such a great defender of the poor people. He always spoke of them. His drawings was more about them, and he was just you know, he was unapologetic about it, and it's so admirable and it's so courageous. And eventually, he paid the price for it, but it was worth it, you know.
His legend definitely continues to live. I
Yeah.
especially appreciated what you said at the beginning about how every Palestinian home has a piece of Hamdallah, and it obviously has a piece of Naji Al Ali, because I grew up in the diaspora similar to you. I know many Palestinians who have only ever lived in the diaspora, unfortunately, and yet, you know, my dad always makes this joke that outside of Jesus, the most famous Palestinian is Hamdallah. And so in this particular case, it's very true, and his you know, his legacy will continue and will continue through his art. I'm looking forward to picking your brain in the Q&A as well.
Thank you so much.
Next, we have Halima Aziz, who's a German-based, passionate Palestinian artist and design student. She's born in 1999. Her mom is from Tulkarem, and her father is from Gaza. She was born in Germany, but spent her childhood in Gaza, Palestine. Halima experienced Israel's military assault on Gaza and Gaza in 2008 and survived. In 2009, she moved back to Germany, and by the age of 17, she started to paint about Palestine, and we're so glad you did. In Germany, she noticed that very few people knew about what was happening in Palestine, and so she started to paint about it. She's proud to be Palestinian and showing her culture through her paintings. Halima's paints in acrylic and oil on canvas. and sometimes with watercolor on art paper. Her artwork emphasizes and expresses her feelings and emotions towards what she experienced in Palestine. She also expresses what Palestinians are still experiencing and continue to go through. Halima, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to hear about your thoughts, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Yasmin. I'm so honored to be here today and to talk about Naji Al Ali. I think Naji Al Ali influenced many people around the world. Through Alhamdulillah, he just doesn't represent himself as a 10-year-old Palestinian child, but I think he represents all of us, all of the Palestinian refugee children. And through my art journey, he, like my art is like all about Palestine, to educate and spread awareness about what's happening there. And I think he was one of those who inspired me and still inspires me a lot. Like, I use his most famous character, Handala, in my artworks a lot. And the character had a big impact on me. And like, when we used to live in Palestine, seeing and hearing about the horrible things that happened to Palestinians, to us and our families, and yeah, the active and violent oppression, being forced to leave our homes in Palestine, and yeah, and still have no right to return. But I think like our parents, or my parents, still, like, they still have hope, and they passed this hope on to us, and they told us a lot about Naji Al Ali, about Handala, and I think you can literally see Handala everywhere in Palestine, on walls or on people's in people's homes. And he remains, like, the character Handala remains a powerful symbol of Palestinian people's struggle for justice, freedom, dignity, and self-determination. And I think just because Naji Al Ali is gone and not here anymore, we shouldn't let Handala die. I think we should keep him alive, and that's why I and many other talented Palestinian artists, like the ones we have today, make art about Palestine and the Palestinians. And I think that's important to show the world that we that they can't silence us, and that we will never stop doing what we do to spread awareness about what's happening in Palestine. And yeah, we will never stop until all of the Palestinian refugees will have the right to return to their homelands in Palestine. And yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Halima. I love your painting in the background. I'm really excited to, also ask you questions. And so we're entering our Q&A period at this point. I do have some questions from the audience that I'm going to read, and, kind of give the virtual floor to every single one of our phenomenal panelists today. And so that being said, the tech can bring up everybody. Phenomenal. Look at that. A beautiful group of phenomenal artists. Amazing. Okay, so I'm gonna address you folks with the first question, but please, let's do popcorn style. Whoever would like to go first, go ahead. And so question number one, what pushback or threats have you as artists faced for creating the artwork that you create, if any? Okay, Carlos, you look excited to answer this question. I'm gonna give it off to you.
Yeah, lots of, because there is a big lobby, Israeli lobby, preventing people to express themselves freely about the situation in Palestine. And for example, in the United States, you have APAC, you have ADL, pro-Israel organizations, which are always ready to accuse you of anti-Semitism or hate speech when you are speaking about Palestine. And of course, you have doors closed because the lobby is very influent. You can lose jobs. You can be prosecuted, harassed. So definitely to take a stance on Palestinians, on Palestine, can cost you a lot. So I usually advise people who intend to support Palestinians. Okay, you are very welcome. Your support is very necessary, but be ready to be attacked. Because if you think to support Palestinians in something like the show business, entertainment, you are wrong. It's activism. It's basically activism, and you can pay a high price. But if you are sure about to support, because the Palestinian cause is, of course, a cause of sovereignty, but also human rights. So if you are sure about to support human rights in Palestine, be ready for everything.
Absolutely. Do other folks want to add to that answer? Sliman, you're on mute, but I see your lips moving. Oh no, he's on mute. Let's see. There you go. Oh no, now you're on mute. Yes, go ahead.
And I think the killing of Naji Al Ali, it was like a warning to many Palestinian creative people, especially in cartooning and art in general. Yeah, I was trying to make cartoons at that time in a magazine in Jerusalem, and I would be lying if I tell you that I didn't feel fear. You know, I got a little bit of fear that if I want to go to Jordan, I might and then I might get into trouble. If I want to go to Egypt, I will get into trouble. To Syria more, to Lebanon. So it will be it's a big fuss, you know, for you if you work really truthfully from your heart. If you do cartoons in a sincere way, then you are a target to many things, you know, including killing. And the killing of Naji Al Ali, it was a threat to all people who deal with who are like him. And even the existence of Naji Al Ali, I know from my students, they like to make cartoons, but at the end they say, well, how can we follow Naji Al Ali? How can we be better than Naji Al Ali? It's like he made like a roof, and it will be very hard for any new person who wants to start doing cartoons to make anything very not very anything similar to what Naji did. But I wanted to say that his killing was a threat to all of us.
Absolutely, but a threat, but not threat enough to have you folks stop creating and all of Palestinian artists to continue to create. Because you know what, we persist, and we continue to persist, and we continue to live, and we continue to create. Does anybody else would like to add to that about the politicization? Yeah.
I just want to say that I feel like there's always this like fine line with the Palestinian story as an artist. There's if you cross that line, you would lose, you know, a lot of opportunities. And like there's always like a conflict between freedom of speech and just communicating as a Palestinian creative artist, model, entertainer, whatever. There's this conflict between freedoms of speech and just, you know, the Palestinian identity. And it's a very interesting place to be in. But like, I think it was Hadil who mentioned that, you mentioned something that Naji said about, you make art, whether it's written, whether it's drawn, and you're dead anyways, but you are putting your heart out. So it's a matter of, fall for something or stand for something or fall for anything type of scenario. So yeah.
And Dalia, one thing is very interesting. You are free to make cartoons about, any topic. For example, if you decide to make cartoons praising the resistance in Ukraine against the Russians,
Yeah.
The possibility for you to get a good contract in a huge newspaper is big.
Yep.
But if you, for example, if you say the same about Palestinians, it's completely different. The reaction is exactly the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Because, for example, I remember the BBC showed some images of civilians in Ukraine pouring gasoline in bottles, Molotov cocktail. And they say, oh, look, the brave Ukrainian resistance. If you show the same image in West Bank or Gaza,
Done. Yeah.
Palestinians filling up bottles, cocktail Molotovs against IDF vehicles, armored vehicles,
Mm-hmm.
you are pro-terrorist, anti-Semite, etc.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very interesting. It reminds me of the debate about the IHRA definition, which I encourage folks to look up, which, the definition itself is fine, but equates the resistance and criticizing the state of Israel with anti-Semitism, which we know is very dangerous. So I encourage folks to look up the working definition of anti-Semitism, the IHRA definition, and, contact and look at other organizations who are working against the definition and for freedom of speech and for the Palestinian resistance to protect organizers across the world, across the diaspora. That kind of leads me to my next question from the audience about Palestinian artists and whether or not you folks think that Palestinian artists and your work is more politicized simply because you're Palestinian versus other artists. Is it merely your existence? Tell me. I think I have the answer for that, but I'm going to let you folks answer.
I have one thing to add about this. So one thing that I would, whenever I would showcase my arts, one thing that I would hear back from viewers, they'd be like, be careful, Dalia, don't get too political with your work. And the thing is, my work is not political at all. My work is literally just it's about human rights. It's like I'm talking about justice. I'm talking about noble humanity, topics that human beings can connect with. So it's interesting how when people see anything, any symbol of Palestine, even if it's the most beautiful message and a message of hope, a message of just like adoration for my culture, they look at it and they're like, oh, that's political. So it's a very very interesting journey we're on here.
Yeah, I would also agree to what Dalia said because I experience the same. I'm actually not political at all. What I do is literally just to spread awareness and educate the people around the world about what's happening in Palestine, and you automatically get political by doing that. And many people tell me also to be careful, and I don't know, many people think also because when they travel back to Palestine, that might be dangerous if you get too political or something like that.
In a matter of fact, being a Palestinian is a political act.
Yes.
If you're Palestinian, your body is a political act. If you present yourself as Palestinian and not Arab Israeli, it's a political act.
This is anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
Yeah. At birth.
And I wanted to add, like in Germany, it's even to say Free Palestine and is anti-Semitic, because I think when you say Free Palestine, you mean by that all Jews should go out, and that's not what we mean by that, because we used to live like all three religions in Palestine in peace, and they, because of that, they like we are not really allowed to even go out and protest in many cities in Palestine, in Germany. Sorry.
Excuse me, I have to say something at the end. You know, if you work in cartooning, it's very easy to get like making long noses, making images that easily they can use it as something anti-Semitic. So I think we have to make an advice to all Palestinians who make cartoons to be careful to not to use anything that could be used against them.
Yeah, exactly. We had that also in school, and in history. We talk a lot about the First and the Second War, what happened to the Jews here in Germany, and even the Germans did a lot of cartoons about Jews, and Jews are known for long nose, and that's what you mean, I think, Sliman. Because of the long nose, if you paint anyone with a long nose, they are known as a Jew. Yeah.
So it's important to stay true to who you are, but know the lines and know where to, what to depict. And what's important. And yes, please, Adia.
Sorry, there's one more thing. I really just want to like really highlight what Mr. Simon Mansour said about not triggering the opposite side with certain things that we portray in our art. Like we really don't want to go the route of trying to offend anybody, because our cause is so noble, and our cause is big on its own. We don't want to like trigger and offend people so that they can use that and distract us from their main mission. And they easily will do that. Like, when we chant like from the river to the sea, they'll use like certain words of like, oh, what, you want to drown us? Like they're just they hang on to the smallest things. So I guess just be careful with the way you portray the opposite.
Absolutely. And this is a question that relates to everything you folks talked about. So it is dangerous to be a Palestinian artist. It is dangerous to discuss Palestine. That is not negotiable, non-arguable. It's the cold, hard, and unfortunate truth and reality. However, with all of these difficulties, how do you continue to be motivated to create and wake up and create and show the world? What is it that motivates you to say, you know what, no matter how dangerous it is, I am going to continue to talk about this noble cause. I'm going to continue to depict my culture. I'm going to continue to say, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. What is it that motivates you to create?
I think it's mainly the sense of belonging, whether you lived in Palestine or you lived in diaspora, this is enough reason for it. This is the least that you can do. Living abroad, this is the least that you can do, whether I'm too political or I'm not political. I don't feel like I don't need to apologize for someone to be apolitical, to express my culture, to express that I am Palestinian, that I belong to this place, that we've been in a war for 75 years. So I think that's more than enough motivation for artists to continue to what they're doing, to hell with everyone else, whether you offend them or not. So this is what I have to say about it.
And that's a beautiful answer. Anybody else?
My motivation is actually seeing the people, like news, like there are actually no news sites, what we see on Instagram about what's happening in Palestine, and every time I see what's happening there, it hurts me so much. And this is actually my motivation, because it also reminds me of my childhood in Palestine, and I wanted, while being there, I wanted also the world to know what's happening here in Palestine and what I experienced. And now, while seeing what they have, that they're still experiencing it, and no one is talking about it. That's actually my motivation to do more art and to spread awareness about what's happening there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, well, you mentioned social media, which I think leads me to all of these questions relate, and you folks are just giving me the perfect bridges. So thank you. It's like you solved the questions beforehand. With that being said, I think what makes Naji Al Ali so interesting as a case on its own, without all of his talents, is the way that his artwork and the cartoon and the symbols spoke to folks before the existence of social media. Like, we've mentioned it on this panel before that you could enter almost any single Palestinian home across the world and you will see Hamdallah. Like, you will see him. We were born and you at least saw a keychain, And so this was before social media. So how do you folks think that social media has changed the game for cartoonists, for artists, and for, the bridge between activism and art?
Definitely. Yeah. I remember when I was in Palestine, the first and last time I was in Palestine was in 1998. And I made contact with an NGO through internet, but I used to send cartoons via fax to Ramallah. And if you look to the past in 1998 and see now, look now, the difference is huge. If not by internet, my work won't reach audience outside Brazil, especially in Middle East. This conversation could not be possible. You probably will never hear about me. So thanks to internet, we artists managed to create content and share with people around the world. And not only this, because except for me, all of people in this room are Palestinians. I'm not. I just was in Palestine once. But what I saw there made me an activist for Palestine, because it's impossible to be there, see what happened, and not to embrace the Palestinians.
We all consider you very Palestinian. Thank you all for you.
You're one of us.
You're one of us, sure.
Thank you very much. But it's important to highlight the internet plays a very important role, because it gave the opportunity to people not directly connected to Palestine to express themselves about Palestine. And now we have something very interesting, because in the past, you depend on the mainstream media in order to show what is happening in your country. But now you have Palestinians. It's enough for Palestinians to have a cell phone and access to internet to show what is happening in Palestine, in Gaza, etc. And thanks to internet, people around the world can have access to these images, to these reports, and produce content, even not being Palestinian or even not never being in Palestine before. So yes, the internet, the social medias are very important instruments in the hands of Palestinians and pro-Palestinian activists and people who care about human rights.
Absolutely. Does anybody like to add to the importance of social media and art?
I would like to add something. I think it's really important that we actually got the chance finally to counter the propaganda that's being spread in the Western countries, and to deflect the lies that are being told about the Palestinians. How the Western media, the news channels, they always filter whatever they want to say about the Palestinians. They will portray us as monsters, as people, as like I don't know how to describe it. They display us as monsters who just want to cause chaos, to kill people, to cause massacres, when in reality it's actually the other way around. We're being massacred. We're being like ethnic cleansing, and we're being ethnic cleansed. And so, being as artists for us, like we're able to spread the truth about what's happening there with our art seamlessly. You know, as you mentioned, Naji Al Ali's work was in our houses. It was just present there. It was seamless. It was just, you know, there by on its own. You know, it meant so much to our parents, to our grandparents. They brought it there, but now it's our duty to actually continue on from that and present more of our case through through our art and the internet. You know, so.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, the ability to hear the voice of a Palestinian and to advocate for yourself, but also share your work to humanize the Palestinian life is
Absolutely.
what social media has done. Yes, Dalia, please.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's really humanizing.
Absolutely.
We now have faces. We now have real stories. People can really connect to who is a Palestinian, and they can get a true insight to our minds, to our art, to our culture, to our homes, and the crimes. Like, you know, in real life, we're broadcasting the actual crimes that have been happening to us with the whole world. No filter, no editing, reproduction team. This is all just raw footage in your face. So it's definitely a blessing to have that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we can see it present in multiple movements across the world. I mean, look at the way that the Black Lives Matter movement here in the US blew up in 2013 with the power of social media and the power of the cell phone to capture moments and put it live on social media. I mean, again, like we see that social media has definitely shifted and changed the way we look at activism, but has especially empowered artists across the world to have a platform that's much larger, much more global, and much more united than we might have ever seen. So that leads me to my final question. And so I think all of us on the call here believe and know that, you know, as Palestinians, as supporters of the Palestinian cause, and as supporters of Palestinian liberation, that we believe that one day Palestine will be free. And so let's play a utopia for a minute. Palestine is free tomorrow. What will your art be about? Please tell me. And so, okay, we'll be next. Free Palestine. Yes, freedom for Palestine. Yes. What will your art be about?
Well,
I think I would still paint about Palestine. I mean, my artworks are not all about what's happening in Palestine, but also about our traditions, our food, our culture, which is beautiful. And yeah, there are many things that I could paint about Palestine.
I have an idea. I think I would love to paint Handala suited up with a bow tie, maybe smoking shisha. I don't know, somewhere in a very
the face. You could paint the face.
You know, like so, just having the time of his life. That would be my next series. Handala enjoying life.
He finally grew
Naz
up.
will be so proud.
He grew up and returned, and then
Yep.
he's enjoying his
Got a
Edgine
mustache.
finally.
Yep.
Anyone else would like to speak to that? Okay. Well, in that case, I'm going to wrap up this conversation and say that you folks all inspire me for painting about the right to life, liberty, and justice for Palestinians from coast to coast, to Palestine, across the diaspora. I believe that we will return because folks like you exist who continue to paint about hope, liberation, and about our cause, and about our culture, and about every bits of who we are. And it's so powerful. And you folks, you know, I don't think artists truly understand the impact of your work. You'll never really understand it, but your work does so much and makes waves in an ocean so huge for real change. And so thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to give you folks the floor for one last thoughts if you'd like. Anybody?
I just want to say thank you for having me. I'm very honored, and it was a pleasure meeting all of you and e-meeting you. And hopefully we can all reunite in Palestine one day.
Palestine. Yes.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. So with that being said, happy Monday, folks. The legacy continues, and I hope everybody has an amazing day. Thank you so much for joining me.